Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. The weird thing about American society is that its presentation of the sensitivity of women is inverted. It acts as if women are simultaneously more sensitive and less sensitive than they actually are. It acts like women are not sensitive about losing their virginity. In other words, American society today acts as if a woman losing her virginity is not a big deal, as if it doesn't utterly destroy her soul to lose her virginity to a guy and then not end up with him. American society acts as if women don't sexually pair bond their first sexual partner, even though they very strongly sexually pair bond their first boyfriend who takes their virginity. But at the same time, American society, acts as if women who are not virgins can be harmed by being screwed against their will by their husband. It's ridiculous. She's had sex with her husband tons of times before. It doesn't hurt her to be, fucked against her will by him. In fact, many women are turned on by that. The rape fantasy rate among women is like, I can't remember what it is. It's huge, though. It's like as big as like 30 or 40% of women. It's huge. And all the rest of women, even if they're not turned on by it, like I said, she's had sex with him tons of times before, so it doesn't hurt her. How in the world could a woman be harmed by being screwed against her will by her husband if she's not harmed by losing her virginity to a guy who she doesn't even end up with? How in the world could losing her virginity be less of a big deal than getting fucked by a guy who she's already had sex with a ton of times before? Especially considering a huge percentage of women have rape fantasies, right? And this tendency to have rape fantasies is not a symptom of our sexually degenerate society that we have today. It's an inbuilt thing back from our primate ancestor days millions of years ago. Women are attracted to rape because if a guy is strong enough to rape her, then it means that he's masculine and she's attracted to masculine men. All guys should be able to rape their wives because it reminds her that he's the boss, that he's the one with the physical strength, and it thus reminds her that her place is to be submissive and to let him have the authority, and it also makes her more humble and more attracted to him, so she'll be less badly behaved and badly behaved less often, and she'll be denying him sex less because she's attracted to him more. So the very fact that he's allowed to rape her means that she's going to deny him sex less often. Not because she can't resist, but because she's turned on by him, because he's dominant and strong and masculine, which he proves by having sex with her against her will, which means she doesn't turn him down much because she's more attracted to him because of his strength. But back to the topic of the inversion of female sensitivity. Do you see how what society presents today is a complete inversion of reality? People in society today, especially the media, act like it's a horrible violation for a guy to rape a prostitute or his wife. It's theft to rape a prostitute, but it's not an emotional violation because a prostitute has no pair bonding ability left, and she's not enjoying having sex with her clients. It's just something she does to make money. It's not much different than if she were doing bicep curls or something, except it's easier and pleasant instead of painful, unlike doing bicep curls, which is, effort, which takes effort and is painful. Right? It should be considered a violation almost as bad as rape if a guy has consensual sex with a girl who is a virgin if he doesn't plan on marrying her. That should be considered a violation almost as bad as rape. It should not be considered rape if a guy rapes a prostitute. It should be considered theft, and a form of putting her life in danger as well, perhaps, because she doesn't know if he has an STD or not, and he might not know if he has an STD or not either. So if he rapes a prostitute without a condom, he should be up for, perhaps like in some kind of form of, endangerment or something. I don't know what you legally call it or whatever, but something like that, But if he uses a condom, it should just be called theft. And it should not be considered rape if a man has sex with his wife against her will. It should be considered him just taking what is his due because, he provides for her, so she's forced, he's obligated to provide for her, so she's obligated to have sex with him. Because that's the deal, that's the contract. But regarding the prostitution example, it's better to leave it to the guy and the girl's discretion whether they want to get revenge if a guy rapes a prostitute, right? Like, if she's really not harmed, then all he did was force her to take his business, assuming he paid her afterward. Not much harm at all. Just an annoyance, really. And if he didn't pay her, then she could go after him and force him to pay. Sick a collection agent on him and only have him physically harmed if he still refused to pay. And if he raped her and thereby gave her an STD, then she could decide whether she wants to have him killed by a hitman or whether she wants to harm him in some other way or whether she wants to let it go. Maybe like under anarcho-capitalism or something. She could decide what she wants to do. If he rapes her, she can decide whether she wants to have him killed or have his arm chopped off or, have some person rape him and give him, AIDS or something. Like, she could do whatever she wants to him, that she thinks is fair for him giving her an STD, right? Like, Maybe she could ruin his reputation and thereby get people to go after him, either physically or financially, destroying his property or boycotting his business or whatever. And that's another reason why we should have anarcho-capitalism, because under anarcho-capitalism, a lot more people will have their own businesses, and thus there will be a lot at stake, and they'll not want the public to turn against them, right? And so there'll be a lot more societal cohesiveness and more of a societally agreed upon form of morality, not because it's forced, but because people just naturally agree what morality is, and when they can't agree, they'll naturally separate from people who they don't agree with, and they'll get together only with people, not get together romantically, but like they'll only live in a region with people who have the same morality as them, so that, there will be less conflict and stuff, right? And so people will be moral in order to prevent people from boycotting their businesses. And without this corporate world, this overly litigious world, this overly legal and complicated world, it's the situation where, anybody can start a business and they don't have to pay a bunch of money to, incorporate it and follow the rules and get lawyers to make sure they're following the laws and all this shit, right? Under AnCap, there's no laws, so, there'd be way, way more entrepreneurialism. So then way more people would own their own businesses, so then way more people would be scared of losing customers, if they did something bad and their reputation were ruined. So people would not be doing bad things, right? Because they'd put their livelihood in danger if they did, right? And if a prostitute was raped or something and ended up with an STD, people might help her, might educate her so she could get some other kind of job because she can't be a prostitute anymore, right? And society would try to protect women by making sure the men who raped prostitutes were dealt with very severely. So either people would be helping prostitutes who got raped and infected with an STD, which probably would not even happen very often, in which case those prostitutes would be fine, or fewer women would be prostitutes, and thus men would be incentivized to not rape prostitutes so as to make sure the women did not stop becoming prostitutes. Because if men were raping prostitutes and giving them STDs all the time under AnCap, hardly any women would want to be prostitutes, and then there'd be hardly any prostitutes out there, and then that would cause a problem. And then men would not like that. So, and the fewer prostitutes there are, the more valuable they are. You see, so, and you protect what is valuable, you see? So, men will be protecting prostitutes the more that there are fewer prostitutes. The fewer prostitutes there are, the more men will protect them. Because, so there's a limit to how much women will stop being prostitutes because they're being raped and given STDs. So, even rape of prostitutes would not happen very much under AnCap. You see? Or people would not be helping prostitutes, but prostitution would be very safe because men would go after men who rape prostitutes, such as by, capturing the guy and tying him to a post and then whipping him until his back is covered in bloody gashes, or cutting off his hand, or infecting him with an STD if he infected some other, maybe he has, herpes or something and he gives it to some prostitute. Well, then maybe the men of the area grab him and then, restrain him, and then, get some blood from somebody with HIV, and then they infect him with HIV, people are not going to be going around doing crazy shit, because there will be consequences under AnCap, you see. So men would be too scared to rape a prostitute because of what could happen to them. So even prostitutes would be treated very well in an AnCap country and be quite safe. Plus, in an AnCap country, there'd be corporations that do one-stop shopping for prostitutes. Not corporations in the way they exist today. I should say a business. Not like it'd be all corporate, like all these complicated laws and lawyers and shit, but there'd be companies that specialize in prostitution, and they would do one-stop shopping. And they would provide the place to have the sex, like an apartment complex where all the women are prostitutes, right? And they have sex right there in the apartment, whether it's the place where they live or whether these are just places they live at during the day while they're serving clients, and then they have an apartment somewhere else. Either way, the company provides the place to have the sex, and then they provide the website for the women to book the clients, and then they'd have a reputation rating system for the clients, giving discounts for clients who use the service for a long time and are well behaved and have a high rating, right? The prostitutes always rate them as very respectful and peaceful and all the rest of it, right? And healthy and clean and stuff. Then the guys get a high rating, and then the company gives them a discount and stuff. Right, and because they're never, and the company would have security on the premises for all the prostitutes, maybe 3 or 4 bodyguards for this, apartment complex of 50 prostitutes, right? So then, whichever prostitute at any one time needs to call the security guys are right there, and the clients who don't ever get security called on them, they get a higher rating, obviously, right? And the guys that get security called on them, and it was a serious violation, they get like banned from using the company ever again. The company would provide security at the apartment complex where all the prostitutes work. And, the company would also perhaps invest the money of the prostitutes, only giving them access to some of it, so that when those prostitutes retired, they would have enough to live on for the rest of their lives. The company would also probably require that the women work a certain number of hours each month, or bring in a certain amount of money each month. If she didn't work enough, then perhaps the company would take a bigger commission from the money that she brings in. And, instead of taking just, 10% of a prostitute's earnings, they take 20% if she doesn't work enough. So she is incentivized to work enough so that the company takes a smaller percentage of her earnings, right? So that this is one way you can get the prostitutes to work enough so that they can save enough money, so that the company they work for can save enough money for them, so that by the time they retire, they'll have enough money to retire for the rest of their life, right? Like maybe the company normally only takes 10% of a prostitute's earnings if she works a sufficient number of hours, although they keep an additional 40% of her earnings so as to invest the other 40% for her, so that she's not going to waste her money and go broke, right? But if she doesn't work full-time, then perhaps the company would take 15 or 20%, like I said, or maybe even 25% of her earnings, right, if she's only working part-time. And that would incentivize her to work full-time and not be lazy, right? Perhaps the company would also provide a separate apartment complex for all the prostitutes to live at and eat at and rest at and sleep at. Maybe they'd live in a barracks, sleeping 50 women per large barracks room and all eating at the same dining room, and maybe there's another big hall room for using the computer or reading at or whatever. So, the company provides all these various kinds of living spaces for the women, and then it provides an apartment complex for them to be at during the day when they're working. Maybe they live at the in the barracks and have that the reading and internet room and then the dining room and all that stuff somewhere else totally different, several miles away, maybe many miles away from the place they work at, and they only live there on the weekend and at night during the week, but during the day, Monday through Friday, they live in the apartment complex where they see clients, right? Maybe they live in a barracks, sleeping 50 women per large barracks room or 100, and they're all eating at the same dining hall that houses a few hundred women, and then that would massively cut down on the cost of living expenses, right? That would enable the company to perhaps keep even more of the women's earnings, and thereby invest more money for those women and make more money for themselves and for the women, because maybe all the profits made by that 40% of the women's earnings, not any of the earnings of that, not any of the 40% that the company is keeping and investing for the women, but some of the profits made by that 40% that the company is not just saving, but is also investing for the women. Maybe some of those profits go to the company. So like the company makes another 10% off the profits that it makes with that 40% of the women's earnings, right? So then if a company used a woman's $10,000 and made another $10,000 with it, then the company would take, $1,000 from that. 10% of 10,000 is, $1,000. So, it would not take the 10,000 that she, which was like 40% of what she made. Let's say, in a certain period of months or whatever, she made what would that be? It'd be a little more than 20,000. Let's say in a couple of months or something, she made $20,000. Or maybe in 3 months, she made $20,000 or 25,000 or something. And whatever it is, the math. Let's say, I think it'd be 25,000, right? And 40% of $10,000, 40% of $25,000 is 10,000, right? I think. So then, if that were the case, they'd be saving the $10,000 for her and investing it, and then with that, they'd save they'd keep another 10% for themselves as profit out of the 25,000 that she earned. So 10% out of 25,000 is 2,500. So they get 2,500 out of that 25,000 that she made. And then they just keep that. That's profit for the company. And then, not profit. They have to use it for, her barracks and all the rest of it and stuff. But, what is the extra of it is profit for them. But then they also get, the 10,000 for hers that they force her to save. If she doesn't have to let them have that money, but if she wants to work for them, then yeah, she has to let them save 40% of her money so she doesn't end up broke when she's old, and also so that they can invest it and make money for themselves and her, So then, with that initial 10,000, they can make another 10,000, then they take a cut of that, and the rest of it's hers. So, she invests 10,000 with them, she has to if she's going to work for them, and then they make another 10,000 with it, and 9,000 of that is hers. So now she has $19,000. and they made another 1,000. So the company's getting richer and she's getting richer. So it's win-win, and they could do it that way, right? And if they fail to grow her wealth or they lose her money, then they make no money, or the money that they they make no money on the money that they kept to invest for her, right? Like she is forced to invest that 10,000 with them out of the 25,000 that she made over a period of 2 or 3 months or whatever. And then let's say they lose some of that money. She, in a few years or whatever, she's only got 8,000. Well, then they don't charge her any commission or anything because they didn't make any money for her. So they only get a cut of the profits they make for her. And you can make it so that like it's not just like when it goes up they take a cut and when it goes down they don't, so that even they could be losing money overall, but like they're still getting a cut every time it goes up. No, you'd only like let them take a cut from anything above what she initially invested, and anything below that, like maybe they have to give up the amount that they made, like any profits. Like if they make $9,000 with her 10,000. I mean, make another 10,000 with that $10,000, and then 9,000 of it is for her, and they keep 10,000. Well, what if they lose 75% of that? So now she's down to like 5,000 out of the 20,000, out of the 19,000 that she had roughly. Well, then they have to give back up their commission, right? That's what you want in investing. You don't want the people to profit when you make money, but not lose money when you lose money. You want their fate, your investors, the people who are investing your money, their fate. The fate of your money should be tied to their fate, right? Like if you lose money, they lose money. And if you make money, they make money, right? That's how it should be. And presumably they're better at investing than you, so they can make money on overall without losing money, So that's how it should be. You really don't want to incentivize it to where they can just keep making money, but overall you're still losing money, because sometimes you make money, sometimes you lose money, but they're always taking a cut when you make money. Even if they don't take a cut when you lose money, if they don't lose money also, that's not good. You know what I mean? Like even if they don't, even if you want to do it that way, to like where they take a cut when they make a profit for you, but they don't take a cut, but they don't lose any money when they lose money for you. Well, then when they make money for you again, they should not be able to take a cut again until they've made enough money for you that they're back up to at least the level that you were at of the money that you invested with them, right? Like if you invest $10,000 with them and they make another 10,000 with that 10,000 of yours, and then they take a cut of 10%, they take $1,000, and you now have $19,000. Well, if they lose, 15,000 of that, and you're left with $4,000, and then they make you another, like $5,000 after that, they should not be able to take a cut from that next 5,000, because you're not even back up to the 10,000 that you invested with them. Only after you get above the 10,000 that you invested with them, only then should they be able to take a cut again. You know what I mean? Like they should never be able to continually profit with you being at a level less than what you initially invested with them. This is how it should be. I mean, you have to align the incentives to where the people that are investing money for you are incentivized to, do things properly for you, because their fate is tied to yours. If you make money, they make money. If you lose money, they don't make money, and they'll never make money again until they recoup all the money of yours that they lost before. You see, that's how it should be, right? Like I said, you got to have the incentives aligned. Let's see, yada 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 yada. And of course, the women would be free to leave this prostitution company at any time and go work for a different prostitution company, right? So if the company started like stealing the women's money or losing it due to bad investing or doing a shitty job at protecting the women because they don't have enough bodyguards on the premises, or they're doing a shitty job at bringing enough clients in so the women can't get enough clients, right? Then those women could always leave and go independent or work for another similar company that does a better job, that gets more clients or protects its women better or does a better job investing their money or doesn't require them to invest their money with it, right? Like the women working for such companies, there'd be many such companies all competing with each other. And the women working for such companies would have nothing to think about or deal with. Just behave while they work at the place, and they provide for her to live at, and while working, show up for work, treat the client well. That's it, basically, right? And the guy would not abuse her because there'd be maybe, like I said, a few bodyguards for every 50 to 100 prostitutes. Let's say like 4 or 5 bodyguards for every 100 prostitutes, and you wouldn't need a bodyguard for every prostitute because most of the clients are not going to abuse the prostitutes. So only once in a while does a guy abuse a prostitute. So only once in a while does a bodyguard have to go and deal with that guy. So you really don't need as many bodyguards as you have prostitutes, right? You wouldn't need as much security, right? So he would not want to risk his safety. The client would by abusing the prostitute. And he wouldn't want to get banned either. So so even if he's an abusive asshole, he's not going to abuse the prostitute, right? And plus, there'd probably be prostitutes out there who charge 20 or 30 times as much money to let a guy beat her up, right? So, those kind of abusive assholes who want to beat up a prostitute, they could go see special prostitutes who let them do that and charge more for it. So then he could go see those girls, and then he wouldn't get banned, and he could do what he wanted. Yeah, sure, he's not going to be able to do it as cheaply, but that's better than getting beaten up by security and banned, right? So those guys would go to those women instead of risking their health by trying to beat up a normal prostitute. Because, there'd also be a panic button. They already have this kind of stuff, like panic buttons and stuff in some of the brothels in that 1 or 2 states that actually have legal prostitution in the U.S. Right? Like, so all she has to do is just hit a panic button, and then the bodyguards come rushing in, and then they beat the shit out of that violent guy who's beating up the prostitute without her permission. Right? So yeah, prostitution would be very safe under anarcho-capitalism. And being very safe, there would be a lot of women doing it. And there being a lot of women being prostitutes would mean that female SMV would be far lower than it is today. And considering women would not have to work for such companies, it would mean that it would therefore be very difficult. It'd be very different. Considering women would not have to work for such companies, it would mean that it would therefore be very different than pimps holding women's money for them, or the government forcing people to give to the government so they can just get it back again in the form of Social Security. Under Social Security, Social Security goes broke. You know what I mean? So this is totally different because you can withdraw. You can't withdraw from Social Security. It's not voluntary, right? But what I'm talking about here, prostitutes paying, giving 40% of their income to the company they work for so it can invest it for them, totally different than Social Security because you can just take the money out at any time and go work for a different company that either invests your money better or doesn't force you to give them any of your money so you can invest it. You see? And this makes it so that all the companies like that would be wisely investing, unlike the government, which just steals from Social Security. It raids Social Security like it's its personal piggy bank. That's what the government does, Forcing people to give you their money so that you can then give it back to them later is immoral because it's unconsensual. But since the women would have a choice to work for such a prostitution company or not, which one they work for or whatever, and could get their money back out at any time, it would mean the company would not be forcing the women to give them their money, and thus only the women who had no problem with the company managing their money would work for that company. Any women who didn't want that company managing their money would not work for that company. Right? And then the company would actually be doing the women a favor by managing their money because women are huge wasters of money, which is part of the reason that pimps keep their prostitutes as money. Because if they didn't, then the prostitutes would just waste it all. And that would be bad for the prostitutes too in the end. And then another reason prostitutes have pimps is because the pimps force the prostitutes to work harder than they normally would, to take more clients than they normally would. And this is a good thing because women are lazy, and so you have to force them to be less lazy. Or you have to at least incentivize them to be less lazy. A pimp forces a woman to be less lazy by using violence on her if she doesn't work enough. But a company that helps prostitutes, such as would pop into existence in an AnCap country, such as I've been talking about in this video, such a company would not be forcing women to work more hours than prostitutes, would not be forcing women to work more hours as a prostitute than they otherwise would. Right. Such a prostitution company would merely incentivize women to work more than their lazy nature would have them work. And it would do this, like I said before, by taking a bigger commission from her earnings if she does not work full-time, thereby incentivizing her to work full-time. She doesn't have to work for the company, though, so it's not force, it's not theft. She can quit at any time. And another reason prostitutes have pimps is because he either protects her from violent clients, or he hires a guy to protect her. But the company could do that very same thing and could probably do so way cheaper than a pimp could. So prostitution would become way more peaceful, way more safe, way more prosperous, way more respectful, way more enjoyable, etc. if we had an AnCap society. It'd be more enjoyable for the prostitutes and it'd be more enjoyable for the clients. It'd be more respectful. Both of them would be more respectful. Both of them would be more prosperous. The price would probably be lower, but also at the same time, prostitutes would probably be making more money. If we had an AnCap society, it would just be all better. It'd be safer. It'd be more peaceful for women to be prostitutes and for men to try to use a prostitute. It would benefit men in an AnCap society. AnCap society would benefit women. There'd be no more force, no more non-consensual treatment of prostitutes by pimps, etc. It'd be better for everyone. It'd be better in multiple ways if we had AnCap. And they could even be, freelance prostitutes and hire their own bodyguard or join together with a few other women to hire their own bodyguard. They could do it themselves. All this stuff I'm talking about, they could do all this themselves. Buy an apartment complex with a bunch of other women who have savings, or take out a loan from some rich person to buy an apartment complex so they can start their own prostitution company. The women could, and then they hire their own bodyguards, their own men or women who are specialists in investing to invest their money for them. They could do all this themselves too. So it would just be better, like in every way possible, right? It would drive down female SMV of non-prostitutes, thus forcing regular women to improve their character to get a boyfriend or husband, forcing them to stay virgins until marriage. That would make women happier, it would make families happier, it would make kids happier, it would make for a far more moral society as all those happy moral kids grow up to be the next generation of adults that society is composed of. So while pimps are not entirely predatory and unnecessary, there are reasons they exist. Those reasons being protection, motivation, and frugality. Those things could all be done by companies, and those companies could do it better and could do it consensually instead of non-consensually. It's like drugs. Drugs are dangerous, with dangerous additives being used to cut the drugs, or to make them more addictive or more enticing. And there's violence associated with selling drugs and all that, like what with the drug cartels being insanely violent. But that's not actually problems with drugs, that's problems with drugs being illegal. If you legalized drugs, then the companies that did not have pure drugs, that put unknown substances in their drugs, would quickly go out of business. Nobody would buy those drugs from those companies. So then only the companies that sold pure drugs, pure heroin, pure cocaine, pure marijuana, etc., only those companies would exist, right? So only safe drugs would be available, and they would all be, and if they were laced with something, it would be cut with something. It would be cut to a specified percentage. You'd know exactly how much it was cut by and exactly what had cut it. And maybe they'd even have some kind of little math thing up there for you to say, like, if you're used to using this company's heroin, at this level of purity, this company uses this level of purity. If you're used to using this much of their heroin, you need to use this much of our heroin so that you don't overdose. Or, or if you're used to using this much pure heroin, you need to use this much of our heroin so you get the same effect. And don't use more, or else you will overdose. And don't use less, or else you won't get high enough. Or you won't be able to maintain or whatever. You know what I mean? You start chipping or whatever. I think that's what it's called when you're, jonesing for a little bit more or whatever. This stuff, all the negatives that come along with drugs is all stuff that comes along with drugs being illegal. Not from the drugs themselves per se. Like even heroin. You can snort heroin. And therefore you wouldn't have the problem of your veins collapsing and stuff. Right? Like even heroin could be safer if it were legal because a lot of people would probably be snorting it instead of shooting it, And the cost of the drugs would go way, way down as well. So there'd be less stealing associated with drug use because the addicts could much, much more easily afford it. You know what I mean? And there'd be nothing there'd be no felonies. If there's no law because of an AnCap country, then there's no felonies, and then there's no records for criminals and stuff. And then, you can use drugs, and then it doesn't harm your employability or anything. And yeah, it would harm your employability with some employers, but there would be a ton of other employers who'd be like, yeah, I'll hire you if you're a heroin addict. I'll pay you 10 or 20% less, because, I'd rather hire a non-heroin addict. But yeah, if you want to work for me and you're willing to get paid 10 or 20% less than non-drug addicts, then yeah, you can work for me. And then so drug addicts would be able to have jobs, they'd be able to be productive members of society, they would be able to use their drugs safely, they wouldn't have to steal because the price of the drugs would be way, way lower, etc. Just everything would be better. And there'd be no forbidden fruit, enticing aspect of drugs either. So people would just use them if they wanted to and didn't use them if they didn't want to. And probably fewer people would use them because it would be like passe and lame to use drugs. And those who did use drugs would only use them on occasion, maybe special occasions. Like maybe a guy would only use cocaine on Christmas or New Year's Eve or 4th of July, or maybe only when he gets a promotion or once or twice when he's on vacation once a year. Like maybe people would use marijuana more, but only because it's a safer drug. Like, and maybe people would only use psychedelics when they need to deal with a very stressful event, or they needed to have an epiphany about a very difficult to understand subject, or something about work. They need an idea for work or something, or when they want to aggregate a bunch of knowledge that they've studied but which they've not yet been able to integrate. Such as if a person had been studying a foreign language for many years and knew a lot of the vocabulary words and theory behind the language, but couldn't seem to get it to click in his head, so that he couldn't seem to think in that language. Like maybe he could take a psychedelic to integrate all that knowledge that's sitting in the back of his head that he can't really make work for him yet. So then, after he takes the LSD or the shrooms or something, now, because he's been studying this language for years, it all just clicks. And then he's able to speak that language fluently after that. Psychedelics can do that kind of thing. You get out of them what you put into it. So if you do a lot of preparation, you can get a lot out of a psychedelic. If you don't prepare at all, you could get nothing out of it. People would only use drugs often if they were harmless drugs. And psychedelics would only be used when they are necessary. And hard drugs like cocaine or powdered heroin would only be used on rare occasions or by a very, very small percentage of the population regularly. Like either only a tiny percentage of the population would use it like every day or something, or the rest of everybody would use it very, very rarely on rare occasions, like once a year or something. Right? And very dangerous things like heroin used intravenously would be assiduously avoided by most everyone because of how addictive it is. Prostitution is not dangerous. It's the fact that it's illegal which makes it dangerous. Drugs are not very dangerous. It's the fact that they're illegal which makes them dangerous. Abortions are the same way. Back when abortion was illegal, it was way more dangerous. The term usually used is back alley abortions or coat hanger abortions. And those terms are usually associated with physical danger. Like the woman gets an illegal abortion, she could easily die. Like you make abortion legal, you make it safer. It automatically becomes safer when you make it legal. Same thing with prostitution, same thing with drugs, same thing with everything. Life in an AnCap country would be way happier, way more prosperous, way more entrepreneurial, way more innovative, way more virtuous, way more creative, way more satisfying, way more fair, way more responsible. And regarding prostitution and investing, another thing to mention is that some people will say that maybe the prostitutes would be better at investing on their own and should not have to leave 40% of her money with the companies so that they can invest it for her. Well, like I said before, she could work for another company, or be a freelancer and invest all her money herself. She could hire someone to invest her money for her, or she could invest it herself, or whatever. Or she could work for a different company. So really, and the prostitutes who are more likely to be successful at investing their own money are the very same prostitutes who are more likely to want to be in charge of investing their own money. That is, the women who are not in charge of investing their own money under AnCap are going to be the ones who don't want to be in charge of their own money and investing their own money because they know they'd suck at it. So it's best to have the women who don't want to invest their own money not be investing their own money. But it's freedom, so the women who do want to invest their own money themselves and decide what their money goes into, those women would be the ones who would be better at investing their own money, and they'd be the ones doing it, right? And the very like I said, the very prostitutes who are worse at investing their own money are the very same prostitutes who will be less interested in investing their money on their own and be more interested in having a company invested for them. So those prostitutes would be the ones using the company to invest their money for them and be getting the most advantage out of their money than if they themselves were deciding where to invest their money, right? So this setup is not only consensual, it's also best for everyone involved. The dumb prostitutes get their money managed intelligently by people who are more intelligent than themselves, and thus both parties prosper. The people investing and the prostitutes, they both benefit. And the other prostitutes, the ones who are smarter than average, either have better things to do and are thus content to let the company manage their money, even though she knows she could probably do a better job herself, but doesn't want to bother, or the smart prostitutes who manage the money themselves and would make more money for themselves than they would having it managed for them, or even if they didn't make more, they would at least be avoiding the commission that would be charged on the profit, the percentage that would be taken on the profit by the company investing for them. If they were doing it themselves, they wouldn't have to pay that extra 10%, right? So both groups of prostitutes, the smart and the dumb ones, would be benefiting by things being this way. That is, by things being totally free. That is, by having an AnCap country. Without force, things naturally evolve to the way things should be. The people who are dumb naturally turn their money over to smarter people to manage for them. And the smarter people manage their own money themselves and profit more that way. Or the dumb people keep their money in something super safe because they know they're dumb and they don't want to take any risks. And these dumb people are also possessed of some wisdom. So while they're too dumb to effectively invest their own money, they're wise enough to know that it's stupid to let other people manage your money. And so they just hold their money in the form of gold for decades. These dumb people are also doing something smart. They're keeping their money safe in the form of gold. Sure, they might not profit a whole lot from doing things that way. That is, not profited enough as much as if they had a very intelligent guy investing their money for them. But, they're also at they're at zero risk of losing their money, unlike the dumb people who are letting other people manage their money, who are in some danger of losing their money due to the incompetence of the people managing their money for them. Right, but of course incompetence would be kept to a minimum, and this kind of large losses would be fairly infrequent because places that would lose their clients' money, especially if it happened all across the company or happened multiple times, those companies be in danger of being burned to the ground and their employees all killed by the angry investors who lost everything, right? And that fact that the people could, violently exsanguinate the people who lost their money would cause everyone in that company to be very concerned about not losing their clients' money because they don't want to be exsanguinated for having lost their clients' money. So even though it would be anarcho-capitalism, it would be far less kleptocratic than today's society. And people who would invest other people's money for a living would strive to make more money for themselves by making more money for their clients, and would strive to make more money for their clients by investing their clients' money in new technology and new companies that would be moral and based on innovation and would lead to big profits, unlike in today's work, where people all try to make money from stealing from each other. And that makes it so that few people are trying to make money by leading through innovating. And that means that everyone is stealing from each other and technology is not being pushed forward very fast. And because in today's work people are stealing from each other, basically, middle class people are poorer and thus can't buy as many products, and like computers, for example, and so the companies are poorer, for example, AMD and Intel, and thus cannot invest as much money in R&D, and thus this means that there's less technological development for that reason as well. And the people who are profiting by ripping other people off are also wasting their money instead of investing it in pushing technology forward. And thus, those Wall Street guys waste their money on hookers and cocaine because easy come, easy go. They make a shitload of money super easy, so then they waste it on hookers and cocaine because it's easier and more enjoyable than researching a company, putting out a new technology, and then investing in that company and waiting and hoping that your money will grow. Cocaine and a hooker are a guaranteed payoff. It doesn't fail. So they'd rather spend their money that way than investing in a company that may grow and earn you money but may not, right? And plus you got to spend all that time researching it and stuff too, and he doesn't want to do that, right? So, these guys would rather cheat and make a lot of money by, cheating middle-class people, ripping off everybody in the financial world, ripping everybody off, especially middle class. They'd rather make money that way rather than actually doing work and researching companies and then finding out who they should be investing the money in. Yeah. They'd rather, manipulate the price of gold and silver They rather manipulate the price of gold and silver and then make, buy it when it's about to go up and then sell it when it's about to go down. I mean, short it when it's about to go down. They'd rather just make money that way, like, oh, yep, we're going to drive the price up, buy. And then it goes up and then they're like, okay, now we're going to drive the price down, short it. And then the people follow the trends of, the trend movers. And so then they just set the trend, they make it move, and then everybody follows them. So it goes down. So when they short it, they make it go down, but then everybody else starts selling as well, all the middle class people. And then it goes down even further, and then they make a profit, right? And then it does go down, and then they buy more, and then the common people start buying even more because now it's starting to go up, and then when they realize when it's about to crest or whatever, reach its peak, they sell, and so they just ride the ups and downs. These Wall Street assholes do, and it's not like they're doing it through intelligence, like they're predicting what's going to happen. They're making it happen. So they're just making free money. This is the shit they do. It's crazy. It's fucking crazy. So yeah, people of today are less likely to invest in a new company putting out a new technology or developing a new technology because everyone is less trustworthy. Because we're in a way less moral society. Everybody's gynocentric, dishonest, and thieving. To a degree. Well, not everybody, but most people are. Like society in the past was unimaginably more trustworthy and genuine and compassionate And like people were like the Good Samaritan in the Bible. People were like that in the 1950s and earlier. People are not that way these days. Now, obviously, a few people are really religious people and stuff, but like for the most part, people are not like that anymore. And so when it's less trustworthy, like oh, what was that chick? Was it called Theranos or something? That chick who created that company and it got like worth like maybe $1 billion or something because she supposedly had this technology of like testing your blood without even pricking your finger or something. Like, but it was all just a scam basically. Like she was like taking in all this money. Like assuming she would be able to develop the technology later on. She hadn't even developed the technology yet. Like the chick who created and ran and was owned the company. Like people didn't do shit like that back in the 50s and stuff. That was like people never did shit like that. But now you got like Enron and that like Theranos or whatever it was called company. Blonde and the Belly of the Beast did a video on that chick. Or it might have been a 2-part video. But anyway, people do shit like that these days. And so like people don't trust a new startup company. Like they're way less trustworthy of a company because a lot more companies are not trustworthy. So then you get less investment, so then you get less pushing of technology forward. Because that means a lot of good companies that are not scams don't get investments either. And then technology is not pushed forward like it should be, and could be, and would be under a moral society where most people are trustworthy. You see, an AnCap society would be the most moral society ever to exist. And in an AnCap society, giant frauds like that would happen very infrequently. And when it did happen, there would be horrific retribution, which would then incentivize all the people out there who are thinking of doing a fraud to not do one after all, because they don't want to get killed. When you live in a highly moral society, then you only run the risk of the company that you invest in failing. You don't run the added risk of it being an intentional fraud. Or rather the chances that it's an intentional fraud are much, much lower in a moral society. And when there's less risk of fraud, then people will be investing in companies more. And when there's more people investing in new companies and new ideas and new technologies, there's more new companies making it to the point where they have a chance of succeeding. And then there are more successful companies and more new technologies becoming profitable and therefore being widely developed and widely used. And then being developed even further, right? And things are always hardest in the beginning, so this technology might be a great idea and basically guaranteed to succeed. But if it doesn't get past that first stage of first growing, that's the hardest part. If it doesn't get past that, it can never grow. But like if it gets past that point and becomes profitable, then it's easy to grow it and make it better and better and better and better. But things are always hardest in the beginning. Starting a commune is always hardest. Starting a new country, starting a company, things are always hardest in the beginning, right? So this means that like trustworthiness is super important so that these companies do get the funding that they need so that they can grow to the point where they will be profitable and they can build on the success that they have and push technology forward. You see? So, and the more profitable the companies are, such as in a country where the people's wealth is not being wasted on war and welfare, but it's instead going to companies when those normal people buy products from corporations, which gives those corporations more profit, which they can then use on R&D to push technology forward so that they can make even more money. And remember, a lot of the cost of a product that you buy goes into the cost of that product. Loss of the product is the cost. Sorry, I think I actually wrote the same thing twice. A lot of the cost of the product is the cost that it takes to pay the employees to make the product, and the materials and different things like that, right? Like, it's not all pure profit. Like when you buy a computer, the computer costs $1,500 or whatever, but that's not all pure profit. You buy an Apple computer for $2,000 or whatever. That's not $2,000 going to Apple's pocket. Because they got to pay all the employees that built the computer and all the they got to pay AMD or Intel for the chip, and they got to pay the motherboard company for providing them with the motherboard and all the rest of it. So who knows what the profit margin is on that stuff? But like, each different product, it has a different profit margin, but it's like already like not a whole lot of it is available for R&D anyway, because you only have somewhat of a small profit margin, whether it's 1% or 20%. It's fairly small compared to the price of the product, right? And then a lot of that has to go into other things, and maybe expanding present capacity for producing stuff, And then only a small percentage of it is left for R&D, technical scientific R&D for, advancing the stuff so that it'll be not just a new product next time, but a better product, by pushing technology forward, right? Like only a small percentage of that, of the, profit is for that, right? So, you need to understand that, like when you buy, when you buy a computer, you're helping pay the wages of not just Apple employees, but Intel employees or AMD employees and a Foxconn employees or whoever made the motherboard or whatever, and you're also paying the wages of the people at the gold mine who created the gold that ended up in the Intel CPU, that ended up in the Apple computer, etc. So, it's not as if all the money goes to line the pockets of the corporations. When less money goes to the government because we have no government or because government is small and thus does not do war or welfare, then what happens is that money stays in the hands of the people of the country. The hands of the people who actually earned that money, and then those people spend that money on computers and cars and voice recorders and all kinds of stuff. Shoes, and then a large percentage of the cost of those products goes to the employees of all the companies directly or indirectly involved in building and selling those products. So by buying more things, you're keeping more people employed. And by buying more things, they are helping keep you employed. And the money recirculates, and a lot of it goes back to the people, the bottom 80% or the bottom 99% of society. So if you're keeping the money in-house, so to speak, so you are keeping the money in-house, so to speak. By being a bottom 80% person and buying a product, you're making a lot of that money go to bottom 80% people who have jobs at those companies that built that product. But when the government steals your money through taxation and then wastes it on war and welfare, that money is mostly wasted. Nothing good is produced and nothing useful is accomplished by a bomb blowing up a bridge or a hospital or anything else that it blows up. And giving money to single mothers just feeds low IQ kids that should not even exist in the first place and that are just going to be a burden on society in the future and become criminals because of their low IQs. And then it incentivizes more girls to get pregnant out of wedlock, and then this leads to even more money being wasted on welfare. Because then the government's like, oh, we need to have more single mothers. We need more single mother welfare, right? And then that creates even more single mothers. And then the government's like, we need more money for single mothers, And then it's far more productive. You just have to realize that it's far more productive and prosperous to have the money stay in the hands of the people who earned it, so that they can spend it on products that is much more prosperous and productive than it is for that money to instead be stolen by the government and then thrown down the rat hole of war or the rat hole of welfare. I'm not saying that there's no recirculation of wealth when the money is wasted on Lockheed Martin's weapons of war or on single mothers who then buy food with that money or whatever. There is recirculation when that happens too, but I'm saying that there's less recirculation and there's more side effect destruction when you waste money on welfare and war, as opposed to leaving the money in the hands of the people who use it as they see fit. And plus, they're not going to use it on stuff that they don't need. So you are allowing the money to recirculate in a natural and necessary way when you leave the money in the hands of the people, instead of allowing the money to flow to the hands of the people at the top through taxation and inflation and stuff like that. People would just be richer because of less money being stolen by taxation if the government were on an honest money standard, and if the government were shrunk by 90 to 99%, and there were no war because government couldn't afford it, and there were no welfare for government because government couldn't afford it. But people would be far richer than even that, because there would stop being the side effect destructiveness that is happening today. For example, low IQs means lower morals, and lower morals means more laziness. And more laziness means there's less efficiency at work because the employee's being lazy. And this leads to high prices for consumers, right? And that's yet another way that people would be richer if there were no war and no welfare. There would be fewer lazy, low IQ people in society, and thus the prices of products would be lower because all employees would be harder working because of everybody being higher IQ, because of, there being no welfare for single mothers. You see, so there being less low IQ kids being born in the first place. And these lower prices of products, because of the employees being harder working, means that everybody gets to keep more money in their pocket while still buying the same amount of stuff, and the company is still making the same amount of profit because it would need to hire fewer employees to accomplish the same amount of work. But because of women being but now you may say, well, then fewer people are employed, and that's bad. Well, not necessarily. That would probably just induce more people to be entrepreneurial, at least if it were an AnCap world. And it also means that, there's nothing good produced by someone having a job, quote unquote job, where they do little work at, right? There's nothing good about that. nothing is being accomplished because you want everybody working hard as possible, not as many hours as possible, but as hard as possible when they are working, so that as much labor can be done, and so that either people have free time because they're not working, or they're working and they're accomplishing a lot, and therefore society is producing more goods, services, etc., and technology is being pushed forward so that, standard of living can get better for everyone. It's better when people work, and when they don't work, it's bad. And when they're lazy, that's almost the same thing as not working, because less is being produced. So this is bad. But, because of XXers being out of the workforce, that would not be a problem. What with, there being fewer employees to accomplish the same amount of work. Because everyone would be getting paid better, and thus all men would easily be able to take care of all women. And this means, the men would buy more products, so the companies would make more profit, which would enable them to pay men more. Right? And then this added pressure of having to pay higher wages to men because of XXers being out of the workforce would force companies to invest in innovation instead of financialization and other crap like that. And investing in innovation would advance technology and bring profits to the company, as well as bring a higher standard of living to the average person. And it would also force the company to be more efficient with its money. And technology being more advanced would mean that people would be able to live the same standard of living while working fewer hours. And this would mean that everyone could work less, and thus the company could make do with fewer employees if it could not afford to hire as many employees because of XXers being out of the workforce having driven male wages up. And who cares if you can only work 20 hours a week? If costs of rent are very low because there being no government, and costs of food are very low, and everybody gets free electricity because of tons of electricity being created by the whole world having gotten onto renewable energy such as solar, wind, geothermal, etc., and the world having gotten off of oil for the most part, and the world having gotten off of the petrodollar, this would mean that even though you can only find a job that's willing to give you 20 hours a week, you can still live a lifestyle comparable to a person who works 40 to 60 hours a week today, right? And imagine if we had no government. You would have people who have a plot of land, and then they build a bunch of little concrete structures. It's like a tiny room, right? And then people who are super poor can rent that tiny little room, or maybe even just buy one for a few $1,000s. Like maybe he charges $5,000 or $10,000 for this little concrete room to live in, and then on that same property he has all kinds of other little businesses, or it's near other properties that have other little businesses that cater to poor people. Like forcing people to pay the insane amount of rent that they're paying today is totally insane. They act like, oh yeah, we need rent control, or we need affordable housing and blah blah blah. No, what we need is no government, because then the free market takes care of it instantly. If you can't afford rent, what happens under the free market? Someone goes, I can make places where people can live for almost free. They're going to be paying me, and it costs me very little to make this. I build this little concrete box the size of a normal room in a middle class house, and so it's like this tiny little place that can fit maybe like a bed, a little desk, and a little thing for clothes in it. Like a dresser. That's it. That's all the room it has. Right? It's this tiny little place. And he'd make a ton of those on his property, so that and then he charges maybe, I don't know, $50 or $100 a week for that or something. So even the poorest people can live there, right? And then he keeps it heated, or he if there were no government, he could do that in Southern California, or in Southern Texas or Arizona, or somewhere where it's always warm. So you don't even need to worry about heating your place. You just have an open door all the time. Or you have a closed door, but it's not even heat insulated. There's no heating because it's just a concrete box. And you stay warm because it's perpetually warm there. Or you do it in Mexico or something. If the government of America were gone and the government of Mexico were gone, then you could do that stuff in a really warm country where it's never cold. And then you wouldn't even have to pay for heating or anything like that. And you could run little lines of electricity in there for lighting and mainly for internet access and stuff like that, right? Run fiber in there, and then run electricity in there, and then everybody gets internet and stuff, and it would be the easiest thing in the world, and it'd be super super cheap. And like I said, you could have all kinds of cheap things around them to meet the people's needs, for them to clean their clothes at, a really really cheap place where they can use the washing machines and stuff, right? And then food, or a little big plot of land where they could grow their own food. Like, and then they all eat their own food and stuff, so they don't even have to like buy food from anywhere else. So they can cut down the price of food by growing their own food on this plot of land that the guy who owns the plot of land and the little tiny rooms that everybody lives in, like, he provides this land for them to like grow their own food at. But like, maybe they have to sell half of the food that they grow. The other half they get to eat. Everybody gets a little share of the plot of land, and they all grow different things maybe, and they all get to share in each other's, or they can choose what they want to grow. But like the other half of their crops they have to sell, right? But the other, and then the ones that they sell, like, he gets the profit. So it's like all profit for him, and then you like, they use natural fertilizers and all kinds of stuff. You cycle the things, so you don't even have to buy fertilizers. You don't even have to buy seeds. You just, let the things continue to grow naturally, and they just, grow their own seeds, and then they replant themselves, or growing their own little seeds and stuff. And so you don't have to pay anything for seeds. You don't have to pay anything for fertilizer. Maybe you'd have to, pay for the water to water the place, but that would be it. Or you could have some kind of like water collection system. You could have some either kind of well that digs the water up and then automatically uses like wind power to pump the water out of a well and up and onto the plot of land to water all the fruits and vegetables and stuff for free. Or you could have it like some other way, like if you're not doing it that way, but like maybe you have some kind of rain collection mechanism, and then that water is stored, and then when it's needed, you use that to water the garden, the huge garden that everybody's working on. Like 100 or 200 people all work on this big giant plot of land, and then half the fruits and vegetables are sold for profit, and the other half the employees who work there get to keep and they get to eat. And maybe they all have outside jobs as well, working minimum wage or something, and then they just save that money, and then they maybe use it for whatever they want, and then the part that they need for food, they just buy the other food. Like if they need more food than they can grow on their own little plot of land, and they're half of the plot of land that they have to grow, like they could buy the rest of it at the grocery store and stuff. So like, it's not a problem of affordable housing. It's not a problem of anything like that. Like, it's nothing government can fix. It's all caused by government. It's all caused by government's rules, which prevent the free market from working. I mean, this is so obvious to me, and it's like such a complicated but yet like obvious issue that I just have to like give this one example and try to like kind of point out to you how it would work. But like, this would work. It would work that way for everything, not just like housing and food and stuff. It would work for everything. It would work that way. You just get rid of government, and then the free market automatically solves all problems, basically. And I don't understand why this is so hard for most people to understand, because it's really obvious and it's really undeniable, and this is the way it would be. The world would be an almost infinitely better place under anarcho-capitalism. This has been Redshift. Hope somebody got some out of this and understood what I was talking about here, because it's really obvious. And it's really important to understand. Peace trucks for people who take women's pair bonding ability without committing to them, and peace trucks for statists.